Okay, well, so I'll just go ahead and just welcome everyone again. Uh, our webinar today is being hosted by CB Water Counts in partnership with UCCE Master Gardeners. My name is Sochi Pena. I'm an outreach specialist with Desert Water Agency, which is a member of CB Water Counts. And for those folks who may not know, CB Water Counts is a collaborative of the 6 water agencies here across the Coachella Valley. It was formed to educate the public and provide resources on water conservation. And the topic of today's webinar is integrating native plants into your home landscape. Following the presentation, you will get an opportunity to ask questions, and we ask that you type those questions into the Q&A at the bottom of your screen there, and we will do our best to get those all answered after the presentation. So, you know, as throughout the webinar, if you think of something, you can go ahead and enter it there in the Q&A. So the presenter for today's webinar is Brad Hardison. He is a master gardener here in Riverside County. There we go. There's his slide there. So Brad became a UCCE Master Gardener for Riverside County in 2018. He is currently the coordinator for children's, school, and youth gardens here in the desert. Brad is a graduate of the UC California Naturalist Program and actively participates as a community scientist, helping other community members and researchers document the effects of climate change on our local plants and animals. Brad came to the Coachella Valley in 2016 from Santa Barbara and has spent most of his life living on the Central Coast or the Los Angeles area. He now makes his home in Palm Desert. His passion is educating the public on native plants and how you can incorporate those plants into your landscape to attract native birds, bees, and other wonderful wildlife. I have had the pleasure of volunteering with Brad recently during one of his youth garden programs. And so I have seen firsthand how passionate he is about plants and education. So I'm happy to introduce Brad Hardner.
All right, thank you. All right, I think we're ready to go. So as was mentioned, we're going to talk today about how to provide a backyard habitat for wildlife, which is really important, and we'll talk about why. And it's actually easier than you think, but and we're going to talk about some steps and how you do that. But first, I want to before we get started, I want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory here in the Coachella Valley of the Cahuilla. So that's important. And a lot of the native plants we're going to be talking about today are used by the Cahuilla in their different ceremonies and medicinal uses and so forth. First of all, Master Gardeners. The University of California Cooperative Extension Master Gardener Program. It's an educational program, and we are designed to teach and effectively extend information to the public on home gardening needs in California. We are part of the UC Division of Agriculture and Natural Resources, and we promote the application of basic environmentally appropriate horticulture practices. We're going to talk about some of those today through the UCCE organized educational programs, such as webinars of this type and other outreach that we do. So you might be asking, hopefully you have some interest in native plants, otherwise you wouldn't be here, but why plant native plants? So obviously reducing water consumption. The nice thing about native plants, when we talk about native plants, we're talking about plants that are native to the Coachella Valley, to our desert. And so they are used to using very little water. They use 1/7 of the water of most non-natives. So that's one reason to plant native plants, because we know that water is not a commodity that is endless. And we want to have beautiful yards, obviously, but we can have that with native plants. So, and we're going to talk about the difference. When I came to the Coachella Valley, I saw a lot of nice plants that looked like they were drought tolerant, but they weren't native plants. They were from other areas of the world, other Mediterranean climates, and they're very beautiful, but they're not native to this area. Pesticide use. Native plants have evolved with native wildlife, so they have less pest issues. I don't use any type of pesticides in my yard at all, and I really don't have anything eating my native plants or damaging my plants. So it works well. And we're going to talk about attracting wildlife to your garden. So you don't want to introduce any type of toxic chemicals to your garden. And there's ways to manage invasive species in your garden without using pesticides. Reducing the carbon footprint. Native plants like nutrient poor soils, so we don't have to add anything like fertilizers, amendments, and types to native plants. You just put them right into their natural soil, which in our case is usually a sandy soil. Sometimes it might have a little more rock in it, depending on what part of the Coachella Valley we're in. And that is the soil they're used to, and that is the soil they thrive on. They actually do worse if you put in fertilizers into the plants. Beauty. This was something I didn't realize until I came to the Coachella Valley and spent time here, that native plants come in many colors. I was used to the native plants that we would see driving through, the creosote bush and some of the different cactus, but there are lots of different native plants. We're going to talk about a lot of them today, and they come in many different colors, forms, textures, and aromas. So you can have all this beauty in your garden with using native plants. You don't have to use plants that are either aren't native. And then to me, the added benefit of all of this is that it attracts wildlife. So as I say, if you build it, they will come. If you provide the plants for the animals, the birds, the butterflies, they will come into your yard. And I have seen that firsthand with the plants and the planting that I've done in my yard. And we're going to see pictures of my yard later on in the presentation. So what native plants are and what they're not. As any of you who are familiar with California knows, that we are home to a wide range of ecosystems. And so when we talk about native plants, we have to talk about native to what area. So for this presentation, we're talking about native to the Coachella Valley, to the Colorado Desert that we're in. And so we're going to be talking about plants that are extremely drought tolerant. We're not going to be talking about native plants that might grow in wet habitats, but obviously those exist in the state as well. California is unique to home to more than 6,000 native plant species, subspecies, and varieties. California contains 1/4 of all native plants native to North America, north of Mexico. So if you travel around the state, you see there are a lot of different species of plants, and we have a lot of native plant species in the state with all of our different ecosystems. And we touched upon this a little bit. Many plants are marked drought tolerant, and they're from Mediterranean climate regions other than California. And you see a lot of these in people's landscape, and they look quite beautiful, and they don't take a lot of water. And so that's a good thing. But they're not native. They came from other parts of the world, from the Mediterranean, and they do very well in our climate. But I would encourage you to look at planting natives. And we're going to talk a little bit about, I have some non-natives and natives, and it's fine to mix them in your plants. You don't have to have a completely native plant garden, but you definitely should be introducing those and thinking about native plants. Naturalized is not the same as native. We have plants that have become naturalized to our environment, such as the Sahara mustard, which unfortunately has become naturalized in many of the open spaces. and fountain grass, which has also become invasive and spread into wildlands. So these are not the same as native, even though they do well in our climate. So how do you choose the right native plant? So we're going to talk about different sources. And I have honed this over time and learned more things about this. I've been doing this now since 2018, 19. And one source, which is a great source, we're going to show it right now, is Calscape. So you can find plants native to your area using Calscape. You just type in your address or city in the address window, and they're organized by landscape popularity, plant type, sun conditions, water requirements, and ease of growing. So I'm going to show real quick. We're going to go to Calscape. Comes up with 7,935 plants native to California. Well, that's obviously too many plants. So you can put in oops, let me go back here. You can put in Palm Desert, for instance, and it'll come up with 332 plants native to the Palm Desert area. You can actually put an address in here, and the nice part is it gives you details about the plants. So if you want to put in a particular plant, like brittle bush, it pulls up the plant and it shows you the distribution of the plant throughout California. And there's a lot of brittle bush around the desert area. It has beautiful pictures of the plant. And then it shows you what I was talking about, the descriptions of the plant, whether it's a shrub, how big it gets, how growth rate, flower color, all this information. And then what type of things it attracts. So this is a great resource for choosing plants that would be native to your area. So that's one thing. Another one is CalFlora, and there's a different way. It's another database of native plants, and you can use the search option on that, which I've used on what grows here. So if you go to CalFlora and you go to what grows here, it's one of the things on the main page, and it pulls up an area, and you can draw basically in that encompasses the area we live in. And you want to include some of the areas that are non-developed, and it'll come up with the plants that are native to that area. And you can do some selections and filtering on low water tolerant or shade tolerant and so forth. So I recently used this, as was mentioned, I've been working with schools. So we recently used this with a school in Thermal where we came up with a list of native plants that would be native to that area. And then later we honed it down further with some more criteria. So again, that's just another resource, Calscape and CalFlora. And so another great resource is water districts. And the Coachella Valley Water District has put out a publication called Lush and Efficient. And it's a great publication. They have it. I think they're distributing the last of their print copies because they're supposed to have a new version come out. But you can get their PDF on their website. And it has beautiful pictures of plants. Not all of them are, of course, native. So it does do a good job of describing the plants and showing photos of the plants and telling you where they're native from. So some are native from this area and some are not. but it's a well organized, and it's a beautiful picture book, and you can get it as a PDF on the Coachella Valley Water District website. So those are all great resources, but they take some time and they take some filtering, and you get a lot of results when you do these searches on CalScape and CalFlora, and even Lush and Efficient can be overwhelming at times. So when I started thinking about why are people maybe not using as many native plants as we would like them to, or they could, and I think it's because people need an easy way to know what plants. People go to a nursery and ask what plants they should plant. People just need something easier and how to find plants. It's just too overwhelming, especially if it's not something you want to do all the time. So you just want to have beautiful plants in your yard, and you want someone to give you some ideas on what to plant. So when I was a naturalist, a California naturalist, I had to do a capstone project for my 2020 California naturalist class. So I did the research to come up with what I called was the 12 native plants for the desert. I thought they were like the star performers. They would do well. They were easy to grow. And so I organized them together. So I'm going to show you my capstone project. And we're going to talk about some of those plants. And I've incorporated most of these in my garden as well. So oops, here we go. So this is my capstone project. I wanted to make it very visually appealing. I've got little icons about the plants, and my sources were, of course, CalScape, CalFlora, things we've talked about, Lush and Efficient. And all these plants are native to the Coachella Valley, which is the northwest portion of the Sonoran Desert, also known as the Colorado Desert. And we'll talk a little later about how you can find these plants. But the first plants I have on here, I had wild marigold, and I've got the common name and the scientific name. I tell you whether it's a perennial or an annual herb, how big it gets, what kind of sun and water use it wants, fragrance, and what it attracts in terms of bees, butterflies, moths. Bladder pod. I love this one. It's very good plant. It has, sometimes people find it an unpleasant type odor, but I think it's really quite nice. Brittle bush, easy to grow, really propagates easily and spreads. Ocotillo, I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. It's used quite often in landscapes, and has the beautiful flowers that the birds and hummingbirds are attracted to. Jojoba, which I was not familiar with as when I came to the desert, but it's a shrub, and it has a kind of a grayish leaf. Tuberosa, which creosote bush, which you're probably familiar with. We have that growing naturally in the desert, but you can put this in your yard. And then mesquites, honey mesquite, which creates these pods that can be used for actually turned into a flower. Desert willow. Desert willow is a plant, can be a bush or a tree. It actually blooms in the summer. So it's quite nice because not a lot of our plants bloom in the summer. And desert globe mallow, very common. You see this when you're out hiking around. A lot of our wildlife use this. You can plant this in your yard, and it's easy to grow as well. Desert lavender, which is a type of lavender. So you're probably familiar with lavenders, but this is the type that's native to the desert. And then desert milkweed, which is important to plant for the monarch butterflies. I've got milkweed in my yard, and I've got monarchs who use it as food source. And I've actually had the chrysalists and new monarchs born on my milkweed. Took a few years, but it happened. And I think that is all of them. Yep. So that is my capstone. And so hopefully those 12 plants will give you an idea of ones that you could get and put in your garden. So we've talked a little bit about plants, what kind of plants you might want to put in your garden, but how do you design your native garden? So there's lots of ways to do that. One is to use native planting guides. I recently found one from the Living Desert on their website at the Living Desert Zoo and Gardens. And so if you go to their website, let's see. See if I have it here. Oh, maybe I don't have it here. But you can go to the website and you can find their information. And they've got you might not think about the Living Desert. You think about it probably as a zoo, but they've got beautiful gardens throughout the Living Desert, and you can actually see those gardens. And you can also, of course, they've got resources on their website. Look at other gardens and decide what styles and what types of plants appeal to you. This is a great way to decide on what you like in your garden. My garden is more natural in terms of design, but some you might want it to be more formal. Your space is important. You need to analyze and measure your space. We don't all have the same amount of space. So where are you trying to design your space, measure it out. Soil type and drainage. Growing plants are compatible with your soil, helps your garden succeed. Most types of soil we have in the desert is usually a sandy type soil, but it could be different even within your own garden. So you want to do just a simple drainage test, dig a hole, put some water in and see how fast things drain so you know what the soil type and drainage is. And do make a basic drawing of your site. It doesn't have to be anything complicated. Just draw out where you're going to put plants in, and so that you have an idea. Because it's harder to move plants once they're in the ground. It can be done, but it's probably better to spend some time thinking about your site. And make notes on your plan of where you get sun or shade. That's going to change, of course, in the morning and the afternoon. It's also going to change based on the time of year as the sun changes its direction. So most native plants like a lot of sun, full sun or a lot of good sun. The biggest problem I've had with some of my plants that I put in is they've been in too shady areas and they haven't done well because they've been too close to the house or not getting enough sun. So keep that in mind. Understand your objectives. What do you want in your native garden? And it could be several things. You may want to provide shade. So you may want to plant some trees close to your house to provide shade, or maybe some type of area patio. You want to create some privacy from another house or neighbors, or create habitat. In my case, I wanted to do a lot of these different things. So it could be multiple objectives. It's always good to start with plants that are easy to grow so that you feel successful. I mentioned a few like brittle bush that are easy to grow and propagate. That way you already see your results. Also, keep it simple. One of the designers taught me that you want to start with a limited plant palette and plant in multiples of 3 or more. So you want to repeat plants throughout your garden, and you don't want to have just one plant of one type. And you want to group plants according to their sun and water needs. So if a plant needs full sun, put those together. Most of the plants in terms of water needs are going to probably be low to very low water needs. But if you have something that needs different water needs, and we'll talk about watering a little bit later, you want to put them together as you're designing your watering systems. One of the biggest things is to give the plants enough space to reach the mature size. You want to prevent having to do a lot of pruning because of size. You will be pruning plants to cut off dead limbs and maybe to create some shape to them, but you don't want to have to prune them because they've gotten too big and you don't have enough space. So look at how big the plant can get, because when you get it initially, it's only going to be maybe a 1-gallon plant and it doesn't look very big, but over time it can grow quite large, and native plants can grow quite large. Another resource is the California Native Plant Society. It's a great organization, and I'm a member of the local chapter, and they've got information on native plant, on planting guides as well. And I think I may have that. Yes. So this is our chapter. We're part of the San Bernardino Riverside chapter. And they have this brochure about native planting guides. And it says, this easy guide takes the guesswork. You can choose the gardens you want. So they show different types of gardens with walkways and colorful entries. This is kind of referring to and sun exposure. So this just gives you some real basic ideas. And then they give you some ideas about grouping some plants together in trees. And we've talked about some of these plants, the desert willow, honey mesquite, creosote. So all these plants are coming back up again, which always makes me feel good that the information that I've done is being repeated. So you don't have to make it difficult. You don't have to have a designer design your garden. You can do it yourself if you want. There's a lot of information out there to utilize. So the source for native plants. This was probably the biggest issue I had back in 2017 when I started putting native plants in my garden. Once I could find information. As I said, there was CalScape, CalFlora. Once I connected with groups like the California Native Plant Society, I could find information about native plants. That wasn't the problem. As I said, it was kind of overwhelming, so I had to hone it down. That was why I did my capstone. But it was more, where do I buy the plants? I went to the local nurseries and the box stores, and they didn't carry them. They might have had drought tolerant plants that would do well in the desert. So you can ask local nurseries to order plants. I've done that before. And fortunately, over the last couple of years, there is a lot more sources for native plants. So that's good for all of you who want to put plants in. Plant sales was the place I had to rely on in the beginning to get plants. And those are good, but they only happen a few times a year, and they're very popular. The Mojave Desert Land Trust up in near Joshua Tree does a plant sale twice a year in the fall and spring, but it's very popular. And if you don't get there early, either in person or online, they can sell out. The California Native Plant Society, our local chapter, until recently only did a plant sale, and they had it in Redlands. But for the last 2 years, we've had it actually we've had a desert plant sale. It's been quite successful at the end of October at UCR Palm Desert as part of Garden Day. So those are things, but you have to get the plants at the time they're having the sale. So that may not be convenient for you in terms of getting the plants. You may not be around, or they may not be available. There are, fortunately, nice regional nurseries that specialize in native plants. The downside is they're not here locally. Theodore Payne is a beautiful native plant nursery that specializes in native plants throughout California. They're located in the San Fernando Valley of Los Angeles. Again, I've gotten plants for them, but they're not convenient. The California Botanic Garden in Claremont, they have beautiful gardens you can go through and see examples of native plants, and they also have a nursery. And then the Tree of Life Nursery, which is in San Juan Capistrano. Again, they all specialize in native plants and throughout California, and some of them that would do well here in the desert, but they're not close by. So that is a deterrent. So unfortunately, that has changed, and now there are more local nurseries. So the one I'm going to, this document is put out by the California Native Plant Society, and it is where to buy desert native plants. So these are some local nurseries that have native plants. Bob Williams Nursery in India, the Cactus Mart up in Morongo Valley, and Desert Straw House, which is a recent nursery. She's been around for a few years. She's up in Sky Valley. We've got a place in the Desert Hot Springs, another one in Indio. So there are a list of nurseries, and they carry different plants, and these are all local here to our area. So you don't have to go far sometimes unless you're looking for something in particular. So that is helpful, and of course the plant sales. So I did want to mention that. So next I want to talk about some of the native plants. I mentioned some of these that are in my garden. And I'm always adding new plants. I just added some plants recently that I bought at the plant sale here in the desert this fall. I've got desert milkweed. I would always encourage you to have some of that for the monarchs. I planted some sweet bush recently. Fairy dusters, they can create a nice hedge. The calliandras. I mentioned the desert willow, which has beautiful flowers and in the summer, and you can create it as a bush or a tree. The desert lavender, desert marigold. I recently planted a rock bush monkey flower. I've got brittle bush, which I would love. Some buckwheat and tuberosa. Creosote bush. And of course, I've got some beaver tail, prickly pear, got a blue palo verde tree, bladder pod, and two different types of mesquite, the honey mesquite and the screwbee mesquite, smoke tree, which people are pretty much familiar with, sugar bush, which people may not be familiar with because it tends to be in a climate that's a little wetter, and then white sage. Love the white sage. So those are some of the native plants that are in my garden. And of course, jojoba and apricot mallow. And I'm always adding more. The limitation is the space I have. So, but as I mentioned, I've got non-natives in my garden. Some of these existed when I bought the house, and others I put in when I wasn't as familiar with what was native and what was non-native. But these are all, by and large, don't take much water. So I've kept them in my garden and incorporated them with my native plants. I think of the biggest one on here that takes a little bit more water is my star jasmine, but I like the fragrance of it. So I wanted to spend some time talking about my native garden, so you could see pictures of what it could look like. So this is generally what my yard. I'm in Palm Desert, and I have a yard that's kind of a pie-shaped lot. So it's got a wall around it, and so this is generally what it looks like. It's probably got a few more plants now since I took these pictures, but you can see on the picture on the left, that's the white sage in bloom. And then that's the shoestring acacia. And off in the distance is on the picture on the right, that's the desert willow. And then I've got the mesquite in the foreground there, and the creosote. And all those have gotten much bigger since I took these photos. And it's a long process. You have to be patient. This is what the house looked like on the left before I planted anything. There was just a few things left that were there when we purchased the house. And then on the right, now it's got this wall around it and all these plants. It's got all this privacy. And so it's kind of like a secret garden when people don't even know what's in there. So this is looking from the house. You can see when the plants were very small. Some of these were native, some of these were non-native, as I mentioned, that I put in. And then as they started growing, they started blooming. You can see over time, they started really doing well. Had a little patio, and again, over time, they just started spreading and creating. Now that you can't even see out and see the neighbors at all in terms of the plants. And the biggest benefit, in addition to having a beautiful garden, which I enjoy immensely, is all the native wildlife that comes to the garden. So I've got all different types of birds. Verdins come, make nests. That's the bird with the yellow head. I've got grasshoppers and praying mantis. You even have roadrunners coming into the yard occasionally, which are eating the lizard, looking for lizards. I have lizards, side blotch lizards and desert spiny lizards. I mentioned all kinds of different butterflies, queens, monarchs. And so hummingbirds are free visitors every single day. The hummingbirds are there constantly. And so now they've got a food source, they've got water source, they've got nectar source, they've got all kinds of things. So they come to the garden and they keep coming back, and I enjoy it. And it's most important because we need to create refugios, places in our cities, in our communities, our neighborhoods, where animals and wildlife can come, because those don't exist as much anymore. As we develop areas where those are fragmented, so we can create our own little wildlife habitat, and we're helping the environment, and we're having the enjoyment of these of wildlife coming into our garden. So when you a little bit about planting your garden. So when to plant? Fall and early winter is the best time to plant. You want to have a healthy root system, so you can do it still right now. Put plants in, perform better without fertilizer or soil amendment. The nitrogen and fertilizers can actually promote foliage. It promotes the foliage growth, but it hampers the root growth, which we want to have strong, healthy roots. Initial watering for new plants in the fall, you water deeply to promote root growth. And you follow a schedule of watering over 8 weeks, gradually watering less. So you start with every 4th day for the first 2 weeks, and then you just less and less water over time. And there are some guides out there which talk about how to water native plants. But deep watering gradually, and it's going to depend on, it's going to be less right now during the fall and winter versus if you were doing plants in the spring and the summer. Watering types, the best method actually, which is the most labor intensive, is hand watering, because you can control the water, you see the plant, you're connected with the plant, and you're seeing whether it needs water or doesn't need water, but it can be the most time consuming. But the nice thing about native plants is over time, you don't need to continually water them. So they just can survive on their own. If you want to give them a little extra water for promoting their growth and flowering, you can. If you do drip irrigation, I would suggest doing something where the drip irrigation is above ground, so you can move the drips, the tubes type thing away from the plants as they get bigger, because you don't want them crowding the trunks of the plant. And then you could dismantle them over time if you didn't need them anymore. Micro sprays is another method. So, but again, native plants don't need a lot of water. So How much to water is going to depend on the soil, the type of plant, and that's where Calscape gives you some ideas, whether it's on a slope or going to be on a flat surface. You're going to have some microclimates in your yard, and then obviously the season of when you are planting. And so one of the sources I use, I had trouble finding information on watering. So the Mojave Desert Land Trust, and I don't think they have this on their website anymore, but they had planting tips, but they also had a watering schedule for new plants. So I used some of this, and I think the California Plant Society, well, they have a guide too that's very similar to this. But you don't want to overwater native plants. That's probably the biggest thing that kills most plants is overwatering, not underwatering. So, and I think we just get we think about the hot temperatures and we just want to keep giving them water. But so I resist that and say, no, they don't need the water. Watering practices, you want to water early in the morning, deep watering 18 inches down. So you want to get deep into you want them to create nice deep roots. As we've seen with recent events, when trees aren't watered deep enough, they can easily fall over. So you want to create deep watering. Hydrozones is watering similar plants with the same watering types. And then some type of mulch is good for native plants. What I use is just decomposed granite, because that's what it's similar to in the actual desert. But that actually does keep the weeds down, and it will help keep the moisture in. And then you do want to water around the plant, at the drip line of the plant, around the actual where the foliage is. You don't want to water too close to the trunk of the plant. Some final thoughts to consider when you're creating a wildlife habitat garden, which is what I would encourage you to do, is to provide, and these are the things that came from the Native Plant Society and from other sources and from the Wildlife Federation, is to create food. Native plants provide food eaten by a variety of wildlife. So that's one thing you're doing by having native plants. Water. They need some type of water. So in my garden, I do have water sources. I have different types of fountains and that animals can come to. I have a stone one that bubbles out that the birds and the butterflies can get water from. So water is an important source. Cover, they need places for shelter and places to hide from predators. So I have a lot of areas that are shelter for them. And I leave bits of broken limbs and things on the ground so that they can, when they're building nests, that the birds have places to pick up those types of things to build nests so they can raise their young. And I've had nests in my yard quite frequently. And as I mentioned before, sustainable practices. So maintain your garden in natural ways so that everything stays healthy. And these are the resources I used for this presentation today that I mentioned. Calscape, we talked about that. I showed you that. CalFlora, the California Native Plant Society. We have our local chapter. There's resources on the Living Desert Zoo and Gardens website, Mojave Desert Land Trust, Theodore Payne, the Coachella Valley Water District, the National Wildlife Federation. They're the ones that came up with those points I just mentioned. I got some information from the Tree of Life Nursery. They've got videos and information you can go to on their website. And of course, my capstone project, where I talked about the 12 plants that I suggested. And of course, if you have just general questions about gardening of any type, you can always reach out to the UCC Master Gardeners Riverside County. We have a email website. So if you're having an issue with anything in your yard, could be your citrus tree or any type of plant, you can email us, preferably with a description and a picture. And we have people who will do the research and get back to you about what could be the issue that you're having. So with that, I think I have gone through. I wanted to make sure we had time for questions. So I think we're at that point.
Yeah, thank you, Brad. That was a wonderful presentation, very inspiring. I do see one question here so far, but everyone, if you have questions, definitely feel free to type them in right now. The one question is, can you share a resource that provides how to eradicate invasive weeds without using pesticides?
So a good resource is if you type in, I think it's on the, let me see if it's on the Master Gardener website. It's called Integrated Pest Management. So this is the UC Master Gardener program of Riverside County. And I believe we have on here, figure out. Yes, under Internet Resources, Integrated Pest Management. And this is what the UC Master Gardener program is, a way to solve pest problems without using chemicals or things like that. So if you go to this, it'll load up this site, and it'll take you further into here. You can look at agricultural pests or exotic and invasive pests. So this is a good resource for pest problems. And it's all research based on the UC University of California system.
Wonderful, thanks. So we have a second question. Someone that joined a little late. She's asking, is the list of 12 suggested plants somewhere I can find it?
It's not, but I can certainly share it with the presenters here, if there's a way you can send it out to the participants by email.
So after this webinar, we will be sharing it on the CV Water Counts website on their webinars page. So if anyone here wants to rewatch the webinar, they can go to cvwatercounts.com/webinars, and we'll share this webinar there. So
okay, and that'll have the list of the 12 plants.
I don't see any other questions. Wow. Okay, so are you sure? No more questions. You have a master gardener here who can answer all your questions. Let's see. Oh, okay, we have this one here. Just a comment, Moosa Creek will ship, someone is sharing, Moosa Creek will ship natives to their partner nursery. And another question, do you mostly propagate by seeds or cuttings?
I haven't done much propagation. It's something I want to do. I've taken some classes through Theodore Payne about propagation, and I think it's mostly going to be done through seed. But that's kind of my next step, is I want to work on propagation. Either using using obviously propagating from my own sources of plants in my yard. But yeah, that's a good sort. Moosa Creek is, I didn't mention them, they are a nursery, and many of the plants that were sold at the Garden Day recently by the California Native Plant Society were purchased at Moosa Creek. So I'm familiar with their plants, and they do a very good job of growing plants. So, and they're in northern San Diego County, I believe.
Wonderful. There's another question. Are any fruit trees native?
Fruit trees. I assume you're talking, I mean, there are plants that have fruits on them, berries. If you're talking about that, I assume you're not talking about citrus because that wouldn't be native. But again, go to Calscape and Calflora and look up that if you're looking for a particular type of thing.
And another question, can you recommend a design program?
Not really. I mean, I've taken some design classes, and I took one through a designer who she teaches at Theodore Payne or Orchid Black, and I would suggest taking her class. I think she has an upcoming class going on, and she teaches you all the elements to design, but it's not really. There are lots of programs out there, computer programs, but the nice thing is she teaches you the ideas of how you design, what steps you go through. So to me, that's more important than the actual program. If you're going to do that, then you would probably just go to a designer, have a landscape designer use their programs and do all that. But it doesn't have to be that complicated. I think we all know what we like and see, and so that's what I've done in my garden. In terms of design.
Another question. Is there a tall shrub that attracts hummingbirds that is upright you could recommend? This person is looking for something that doesn't get as tall as a tree.
I can't think of one offhand, but you can. Well, all of the Calliandras can be shrubs, hedges. The desert willow, you can keep it so it's not as tree-like. But if you go to Calflora and you can search in here on different searches, and you can search on shrubs. Here, we can search on shrubs here, and that would come up with a list of types of shrubs, and you could keep going down and find what you want that are native to the area. And that would give you, and this one, Calscape, gives you nice descriptions of the size of them. So I would use the Calscape Advanced Searching Service.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, we have, let's see. Oh, a couple more questions here. I think this is a question about the Catalina cherry. I'm not sure what they're asking. Jennifer? Is it Toyon?
Oh, Toyon.
Yeah.
I'm
not sure what the question is there.
Yeah. I mean, you could look up Toyons in here, or
Oh,
you could look up, this might be, if this is the one you're
Oh.
talking about, or a different one, or I'm not familiar with, Catalina cherry, that comes up with a different one. But that's where Calscape, you can type these in, the common names or the other types of names. If you're looking, and this has information about it. I'm not as familiar with that particular plant, but.
okay, yeah, well, thanks for those suggestions. Okay, I think, I don't see any more new questions there. Okay, well, if anyone does have any questions, Fred shared the information on, you can ask a Master Gardener questions, go to the website, which is a wonderful resource. So yeah, so thank you, Brad, for, this wonderful presentation, and thanks to everyone who spent your lunch hour with us. We definitely appreciate that. And like I mentioned, we will post the webinar on our CV Water Accounts website in case you want to go back and watch it again. And for those of you, real quick, who don't already receive the CV Water Accounts monthly e-newsletter, we'd love to add you to it. And if you decide you don't want to receive it anymore, just let us know. But I think that that's it. And we're ending about 3 minutes early. So there you go. Thank you so much again. And thanks, Brad. I found this to be very educational. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.